Okay, so we should be live, and I'm gonna be doing the first ever patron only Ask Me Anything stream. So just testing out this concept for a patron reward to see how it goes. And I've been reluctant, I guess, before now ever to do Ask Me Anything type streams, especially not public ones, because lately, as I get more of an audience, I find that I have to be like really careful about what I say about a lot of things, because if I say some stupid shit, it creates a bunch of drama and it gets posted on Twitter and then I have to deal with it. So I tend to prefer only writing things. Or when I do live streams, I just get wasted and play video games. So, that is usually pretty innocuous. But since this is a patron only thing, and I think it'll be fun, and I hope it's kind of a way for patrons to feel like they can have more direct involvement with me. I mean, my DMs on Patreon, I actually respond to those unlike Facebook DMs, which I kind of ignore now because I get too many messages to actually respond to everyone. But this is kind of a good way to sort of address common questions that people have and just have more of a kind of community discussion about stuff. So what I'll do is start with the questions that I have from the $10 people, because those are the ones that those are the ones that I've in the current system said that I'm guaranteed to answer. So I looked these over in advance so I can hopefully give a little bit better of an answer to them. So the first question is from Kate Reads Books, and it is, do you have any book recommendations besides Ways of Seeing for teenagers who are on the verge of becoming edgelord trolls? My nephew's web presence has been getting more and more alt-righty lately, and I'm wondering if I can con him into reading some things that might change his mind. Thanks, Contra. So I guess the tricky thing about teenagers becoming edgelord trolls is that what's getting them into this in the first place is not books, right? So in a way, books might not be the solution at all, because I don't know, do kids these days read? I mean, if he's smart and likes reading, then you could actually do Ways of Seeing, although it's a little bit Marxist academic, I would say, but it's pretty conversational. But you have to kind of be ready for it, and it helps to be sort of interested in art in the first place. So for honestly pulling a teenager out of the alt-right land, I would say in a way non-alt-right YouTubers are better, and there's people who are sort of good at hitting that audience better than others. So I would say, well, my channel obviously is kind of directed towards pulling edgelords away from the brink. But also, I don't know, if we have a teenage boy, I would say Omni Destiny, the streamer who I've done a bunch of little interviews and streams with, because he is a gamer and a game streamer, and by his own admission, an ex-shitlord and ex kind of edgy person who used to be like that. And he's talked about a lot on his streams how he's kind of gotten away from it. And so, yeah, I guess if you could trick him into starting to watch Destiny, that would certainly be an improvement on, Drontron or whoever it is he's watching now. As far as books, I don't know. I don't know, because part of the problem is that this phenomenon of teenage edgelord alt-right stuff is so new. I don't even know that the publishing has been able to keep up with it yet. There aren't that many books about this. I mean, I guess the question is more books about getting into how to be more conscious about social justice topics. That is not necessarily a recent thing. I guess when it comes to just more general philosophy, there's a book for teenagers called Sophie's World, although that's a little more directed at girls. and it's just kind of a general philosophical book, but it's a pretty good introduction to philosophy for teenagers. And I think there's a chapter on feminism, so you could always try that. But good luck in any case. Okay, so Theodore Warner asks, is bisexuality perpetuating the orthodoxy of gender as binary? Oh man, I'm going to actually have to think about some of these questions, because I'm used to doing live streams where I drink 7 beers and play Pokemon. But you guys are making me actually think about things. It's like a philosophy seminar in here. Well, let's see. I mean, so the question, I guess, is the term bisexual, right, with the prefix bi, to some people sounds like the implication is that there are 2 genders and that you're attracted to both of them. And so it seems exclusionary of genderqueer people and possibly trans people. I guess that's maybe the etymological implication of it. But I've talked to some bisexual people. I think actually Marina Shut Up on YouTube, she has a video about this. She calls herself bisexual, and she doesn't think it's exclusionary. So the less exclusionary word would be pansexual. That you're attracted to all genders. I think a lot of bisexual people are pansexual, really. So I think that it probably it's best not to get too hung up on the terminology. And I don't think that I think a lot of the people who use the word bisexual for themselves are not like against genderqueer or trans people, or not ruling out dating them even. So I think that focusing too much on the term isn't necessarily helpful, but of course there probably are people who are not interested in dating genderqueer and trans people, which this opens up the whole this whole thing about whether it's bigotry to not date trans people. Which, is it bigotry to not date trans people? No, it's not. You don't have to date trans people. But oh god, am I gonna talk about this? I've been avoiding talking about this subject because there's just like no good way to talk about it. My understanding of what I think is the sensible way to understand this thing is that cultural transphobia that all of us are kind of exposed to does influence to some extent who you're attracted to and what your dating preferences are, and you could acknowledge that. I think it's good to acknowledge that. And I think that when you do acknowledge it, you can actually kind of work on it. I think people who initially would rule out dating a trans person realize that, like, in terms of pure physiological reaction and visual attraction and things like that, like, they are in fact attracted to a lot of trans people. It's just that they have these weird hang-ups about genitals and things. And that kind of stuff you can kind of get over. Now, I'm not saying you have to get over it. I'm definitely not saying that, like, I'm going to force you to get over it. I'm not saying that you're a bigot if you don't get over it. I'm not saying that you have to date me or you're transphobic. I'm not saying any of those things. I mean, for one thing, I don't need to, like, there's plenty of people trying to fuck me as it is. I don't need to be, recruiting reluctant lesbians or anything like that. But wow, this is like way more of an answer than this question was asking for. But yeah, I guess the short version is I don't think the term bisexual is that problematic. Okay, Luke Jensen asks, if you had, emphasis on the fact that you have to, change your name, what would it be? It can't be similar to what you already have, e.g. if I changed my name to Lucas. That's a cop-out. So it's funny that you asked this, because I am in fact going to change my name. So I'm taking it very seriously. And I mean, the reason I'm changing my name, so I don't know if you saw on Twitter, but like basically I'm going to start taking male to female hormones, and I kind of want to live my life more as a trans femme person. I'm still kind of undecided on the terminology of it, like whether I would want to call myself a trans woman, which seems like a big step over just calling yourself genderqueer. I'm not exactly sure, but my feeling is that what I want to do is just kind of live my life first and then let the language follow. my life. So I'm like reluctant to declare like I'm a trans woman before I start living that. You know what I mean? Like, and because I know this is like kind of the opposite of what people usually do. Like they announce to the world like I'm a trans woman, and then they start hormones later, and they start. Whereas I kind of want to like start all that first and feel it out, and then if there comes a day where I'm like, wow, I'm just living my life as a woman at this point, then I'll be like, I'm a trans woman. But as far as what I identify as, oh man, I can be as snowflakey as I want because this is a Patron only stream. I guess I'm trans feminine and genderqueer, but probably I'm moving to using more female pronouns, she pronouns. So I'm thinking of changing my name to something that corresponds to that. So my name right now is Nick. That's the name people call me in real life. And that it's like a little androgynous, right? Because it can be short for Nicole, but I want something that's a little more femme than that, I think. So I've thought about Nicole and Nikki. I have no problem with those names, but I think that Nikki is what people used to call me when I was like a 7-year-old boy. And I'm not trying to transition into a 7-year-old boy. If people want to transition into a 7-year-old boy, fine. I'm not judging, but that's not my scene, man. So I'm looking for something that's a little more, I don't know. So Nicole, I don't know. Nicole just doesn't feel right to me. I think I've known too many Nicoles, or like there's a specific Nicole that it reminds me of. So I'm kind of thinking of Natalie at the moment. And that's really femme, I know, which seems like a commitment to that. I figured people could call me Nat, which is kind of jaunty and androgynous. And it has like, jazz history. It is also what people call Natalie from Community Channel, which is one of the oldest YouTube channels that I like. Now, naming yourself after a YouTuber, that's obviously not good. But I don't know. I feel like I've known a lot of Natalies, but none of them too close, where it would be like, oh God, I've stolen someone's name. So I don't know. I'm thinking of going with Natalie. So I guess that's the answer of the question now. But I'm not decided on that yet. Again, I'm kind of stalling on, Natalie King Cole. Very good, Peter. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat. Okay, I think that's probably an even better, that's a better answer to that question they could have expected. So we'll move on. Snailwood asks, how has your opinion about the term classical liberal and the people who identify as classical liberals changed over time, if at all? Well, I mean, classical liberal has always, in my experience, has always been just a euphemism or a, neologism for conservative, right? Like, I guess, back in 2007, 2008, classical liberal was the word that was used by libertarians, right? I'm pretty sure like Ron Paul would say I'm a classical liberal back at the height of Ron Paul being popular before the alternative right. I mean, and so back in like 2007, 2008, that was like the alternative right, was libertarianism. Like if you were a right winger who was kind of like a young white guy who wanted to legalize pot and illegalize affirmative action, what you would do is you would be a libertarian, and they would not play up the racial identity thing at all. They would always deny that had anything to do with it. Now, of course, of the people I know from back then who used to identify as libertarians, about half of them have just become leftists and given up and outgrown the libertarian thing, and the rest of them have largely become the alt-right. So, I think some of the people who originally identified as classical liberals, they call themselves classical liberals, they were people who just were kind of like, it was almost all white guys, right? It was like people who were white guys who were kind of, maybe raised conservative, but kind of like this was their stepping stone out of conservatism, where they still, kind of believe conservative things, but they were already being bothered by stuff like the fact that the Republican Party was against gay marriage and was against drugs and was kind of religious, right? And all these things that were very thoroughly uncool. So if you're a 21-year-old white guy in 2006, like you didn't want anything to do with the Republicans, so you just call yourself libertarian or classical liberal. Well, now those people, either they've gotten woke, right? And now they are just leftists or liberals. And either that or they were calling themselves classical liberals because they were dog whistling racism, right? Or they were really racial identitarians of some kind who now just call themselves that. So I think that the term classical liberal over time, I mean, it basically still is the same as it used to be in terms of, Dave Rubin, like a guy who believes what Dave Rubin now believes probably would have believed the same things then. But I think the term has gotten worse. Like I like people calling themselves classical liberals less now than I used to, because now it often serves as this kind of like the enablers of the alt-right, or the enablers of identitarianism, right? It's I mean, I guess in my mind, classical liberal, in the part of the internet that I move through, like Dave Rubin is the king of the classical liberals, and he kind of embodies this particular set of ideas about it that kind of revolve around free speech and, listening to both sides and always debating things, never ever having a result. Every question is an open question. We never get to decide once and for all that Nazism is bad, or that trans women are women, or that women should be able to vote. We should just keep debating it forever. So that's kind of the set of associations that term has to me today. Next question, Eden Erickson asks, how much wood could a woodchuck cuck if a woodchuck could cuck wood? Well, I guess that depends on how much of a cuck the woodchuck is, because a woodchuck cuck can cuck a lot harder than an uncucked woodchuck. I'm not sure I can answer this question any better than that, so we'll move on. Butseps asks, do you have any advice for someone who is considering starting a YouTube channel? Well, yes. I mean, it depends a little bit, obviously, on the type of YouTube channel you want to start. So, I mean, if you wanted to do a political YouTube channel, I would say initially, probably to keep your endurance, is you want to avoid massive controversy early on, unless you're the kind of person who just likes a lot of attention, even if it's negative attention, in which case, go nuts. What you should do is make a video throwing a bunch of shade, calling a bunch of people out, and then you'll get a bunch of attention, most of it overwhelmingly negative, but attention. So you could do that, but don't do that. I guess that's kind of what I did, but yeah, I guess if you've advice considering starting a YouTube channel, I mean, if you're not used to being a public presence on the internet, and especially if you want to do controversial stuff, I would say, avoid using your real name or identifying things at first, unless you decide that that's, something you want in your life. Keep in mind that the internet can basically be forever. So you don't want to upload something unless you've really thought about that. But don't let that discourage you too much at the same time, because you also have to give yourself room to make mistakes. You don't get good at anything unless you suck at it a lot first. So, don't worry that your videos are not the highest quality when you first start out. I mean, mine weren't. No one's are. Like, you don't get good at something by, no one starts out being a genius at anything. Like, you fail at it and fail at it and fail at it until you fail less a little bit each time, and then you're good at it eventually. I guess I would say, here's some advice. Don't make if you make a video about someone, or you mention someone in a video, always assume that they will watch the video at some point. I wish I had thought of this earlier on, because in some of my early videos, I say shitty things about people who I now wish I hadn't said shitty things about. I won't get more specific than that, but when you first start on doing this kind of thing on YouTube, doing response videos and things, like, YouTubers seem like they're just these like giant like celebrities, right? Who like they're not even real people. They just seem like fictional characters, or like I don't know, it's like Kim Kardashian or something. Like you just think the notion that these people could actually watch your video just seems ridiculous. And then of course when they do watch your video, you're like, oh god, like I wasn't thinking when I made this about them watching it. Well, think about them watching it, because actually YouTubers are not very famous. They're not. And a lot of them are very vain, and if you name drop someone, their fans will all send them the video and they'll come watch it. So assume that the people you're talking about are listening to you, and So don't burn bridges that you don't have to burn, because and don't insult people unless you have assumed that they'll hear you insulting them. So part of that is just out of humanity, right? Like, be humane. Understand that the people you're saying things to, you understand the people you're talking about can listen and probably will listen. So don't be cruel. But also, you know, one thing I figured out, you know, I remember, you know, making the first few videos I have of my channel, like there's one about like Bering and Blair White, and I was like shocked when I made that video, and Bering and Blair White both commented on it. Now, fortunately, I didn't say anything, like, I was honestly pretty soft on them considering how bad they are. But it was still jarring to realize that, like, oh wow, the venerable internet personality Bering has lowered himself to watching my little video. You know, that's how I thought about it at the time, because these are people with hundreds of thousands of followers, so they seem like celebrities. They're not celebrities. They're not celebrities at all. They're just losers in their basement, just like you, and they will listen to what you say. So one thing you can do is, what I mean, this is kind of a specifically ContraPoints thing, but you can sort of think about how I did that when you think about how you want to talk. So what I would do is I would make response videos as a framing device that was something kind of friendly, like inviting them to dinner, right? Or something like that. Where you imagine that you're talking directly to the person, and you imagine them in the room with you, and when you're looking into that camera lens, you imagine that you're looking them in the eye. Don't say anything to the camera that you wouldn't say to their face, because you are saying it to their face in all probability. So that might be not relevant advice if you're making a video about a YouTube channel about cooking or something, but if you want to do politics and response videos and that kind of thing, I think I'm giving you solid advice here. Okay, Ms. Contrary asks, are there any topics that you will not make videos about? Well, I mean, obviously, if I were to interpret this literally, obviously there's many topics I will not make videos about. I will not make videos about the construction of jet engines, but let's interpret this more intelligently. I assume that what you're asking is, are there any topics that I'm just like not comfortable making videos about for some reason that I might otherwise make a video about? And let me think. I mean, I'm willing to go like pretty much anywhere. I mean, I do Nazis. I do my own dark inner psychology. I do. I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's anything that's like I think I wouldn't make a video about. There's there's topics that I think there's a right and a wrong way to approach them, and I guess I would say I'm moving to a point where I don't make response videos to people who I think aren't worth talking to. So, you know, a lot of YouTube feminists for a while got really stuck on this pattern of making response videos to people like Bering or to people who are just bullies on YouTube, right? That's a waste of time. Don't make those videos, because all you're doing is you're not helping anything. You're making life worse for yourself, because Bering and his fans are going to come have a good laugh at your expense, and you're not really going to reach any of them, because they're not interested in talking. They're not interested in discussion. They're not interested in an exchange of ideas. They're interested in the lulz, and the lulz at your expense. So, yeah, I would say that's not a topic. It's a style that I would avoid, is responding to people not worth talking to. As far as topics, I mean, I'm trying to think if there's like a commonly requested topic that I just won't do. Well, so I mentioned earlier in the stream that I'm going to be transitioning. That I have mixed feelings about making videos about that. And one part because it's very personal, but I mean, I'm usually okay with going personal, but I I often worry about a topics being too solipsistic. You know, I don't want to make a video that's only about me unless I think that that video will be of interest to lots of people who are not just interested in me. So the gender dysphoria video is probably the most personal one I've done, that and the genderqueer video. But in each of those videos, I thought that I could do it in a way that would be more widely interesting. So for the genderqueer video, it wasn't just like, this is my story, this is who I am, you know. It was, the title of the video is I'm genderqueer and what the fuck that means. So it's more broadly about like what is genderqueer, this thing that a lot of people are probably curious about. And the dysphoria video, yeah, it's like a, you know, kind of cinematic depiction of my own psychology, but one I thought would be interesting, not just because of people who are curious about me, because who cares, but because people are curious about gender dysphoria. And a lot of times when gender dysphoria is presented on YouTube or in, you know, blogs or textbooks, or psychology books, you know, medical journals, it's presented in a kind of abstract way. You know, it's described in general. But I thought that having sort of showing, not telling, my own dysphoria would give it kind of a particular experience of one person's real experience. And that is something that I think has much more emotional resonance than an abstract description. You know, it's kind of like the difference between literature and philosophy. Like, philosophy describes things in general, but literature describes, so literature and philosophy both deal with the human condition, right, in some vague way. But philosophy describes what you know, the problems of humanity's general problems, whereas literature describes the lives of individual people. And there's a reason why literature is much more emotionally resonant with us, because we don't relate well to abstractions. We relate to individual people. So that's I guess when it comes to personal topics, I try to do it only if I think that there's kind of a wider interest. So hopefully that answers your question. Howie asks, do you still have literally any copies of your old, more embarrassing videos like your questions for feminists, and will you ever let us laugh at them with you? So I have copies of all of them. People ask me all the time if I'll re-upload them, and the answer is absolutely not. I will not ever re-upload them. Now, is there a chance that I will do a stream for patrons only someday where I watch a select few of them, carefully curated by me with my commentary? Yes, I could conceivably do that. And maybe I'll go through some of them. They make me cringe really hard. I find it very painful to watch them. But it's just like a million needles being stabbed into my heart. But I I consider like watching a few of them if I think there's anything interesting about them that I want to like react to. So it's possible that I would do that. Garrett Mitchell asks, you have to hang out with one member of the gang from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia for a week. Who and why? So right away, I think we rule out Dennis. I don't want to spend any time with that guy. Rule out Mac. That would be horrible. So I guess we're talking either Charlie or D. Now, I feel like most people would probably say Charlie, because Charlie is kind of the only member of the gang who's actually kind of likable. I guess because Charlie is he has delusions about himself like they all do, but on some level, Charlie has accepted who he is in a way that the other ones haven't. Like, he knows that he's a street rat who forages in the gutter for rings and coins, and he's kind of accepted that on some fundamental level. And so I guess that there's an appeal to hanging out with Charlie. You know, you could sniff glue, you could eat cat food, and generally not have to deal with a narcissistic, delusional asshole. So maybe Charlie, but maybe D, because I feel like I could probably get on board with, like, D's delusions could take me to fun places. Like, I'd be down to do D's, like, to participate in D's Sex in the City delusions, like drink Cosmos and hang out with Artemis. See, D, I would mostly want to hang out with D if it would bring me close to Artemis, because Artemis is like the only character on that show that I actually like, because I I don't know. She seems like an amusing person to be around. She talks to strangers about her bleached asshole. Uh, I feel like I would get drunk with Artemis. But yeah, so I guess probably Charlie's the way to go. I'm glad the uh, chat agrees with me on the Artemis thing. Okay. Sam the Kelly asks, "Who is your favorite character to play? Why?" I'm glad you asked that because I've been thinking about this lately. Basically, the answer is my favorite characters to play are all villains. So Fritz, I fucking love being Fritz. That was awesome. I've got to bring Fritz back because playing Fritz is so fun to me. Um, and I'm writing a video now about turfs. So it's kind of a dialogue format like the what the alt-right fears, no, not that one, like sorry, debating the alt-right, or like the BDSM video. And Abigail Cockbane as a character, she was at least a little bit sympathetic in her past appearances, but in the turf one, she's the villain. And I'm actually a little disturbed how much fun I'm having writing just horribly transphobic things to put into her mouth. I don't know what it is. There's something like cathartic to me about impersonating the like oppressive viewpoint for lols. It's just fun to get to. I think it's also because I'm such a giant social justice warrior that I usually have to be so good and so righteous. It's fun to be a horrible asshole sometimes, or to pretend to be a horrible asshole. So yeah, I really enjoy playing Abigail Cockbane. I enjoy it too much. It's the problem, honestly. Like, I'm writing this video, I'm just like sitting at my desk alone, writing her lines, and I'm reading them aloud in her voice, which is like this, and like I'm just like laughing to myself. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to filming this because I like Abigail, and I like Fritz. I like Jackie Jackson too, the classical liberal, because she. She's another villain basically, right? She's like, I like impersonating my opponents. I just like it. Like, like Saul Saltzman's not, well, he was kind of fun to be, because it's also fun to be someone who's like this really ineffectual person. I don't know. I guess I just like acting. I never really did acting. Like, I was never like into theater or anything, but I'm starting to do it for YouTube. I don't think I'm that good at it yet, but I'm trying to practice a little bit and improve. I think I actually like it. Like, it's a lot of fun to be a different person. So yeah, I like playing villains. I like writing villains. Lauren Taylor asks, "You said in a video that you thought gender should be confusing to kids. Do you have any other thoughts about talking to kids about gender, sex, etc.?" So I'm to be honest, I don't really spend very much time around children, and I guess I've taught piano lessons, and that's the most time I spend around children is teaching piano. So I know about teaching piano to children, but I don't know anything about teaching gender or sex to children, to be honest. I have no idea how to do that. And I think the way that I would be with my own kids is probably not something that I can really endorse to other people, just because other people have very different ideas about childhood than I do. And maybe I'm just stupid, and maybe I'm just naive when it comes to children, because I think that, I don't know, to me, like, when I imagine how I would raise my own kids, I would just like the point of childhood is just to get to adulthood like as fast as possible, right? That's the point. That's the point of children, is that they become adults. They're not pets, you're raising an adult. So the idea of having this prolonged period of innocence doesn't make any sense to me. Like, oh, don't tell children about anything. They can't know about that yet. Like, well, they're gonna find out. Like, I don't see why you're doing them a huge favor by like denying them that sex exists, because otherwise, like, I first found out about sex when I was in like 4th or 5th grade, which I guess is actually pretty late by most people's standards. I was the oldest child, so that you're slower to develop when you're the oldest child, because when you're the youngest, your older siblings tell you everything. But I found out about sex, from people like at school, and probably that's a much worse and more ignorant way to find out about it than if an adult explains it to you. So personally, like, I'm completely fine with people who want to teach kids about gender and sex. I don't have any sense that it's inappropriate. I know, so like there's a YouTube channel, Queer Kid Stuff, that Lindsay, who hung out with a bit at VidCon, does. I love what Lindsay does. I think she's really nice, and I don't think that a lot of people are just like horribly shocked and offended by this show that she does, where she explains, queer, gay, lesbian, trans topics to like pretty young children. I think it's completely fine. Like, I would rather be around the children that grow up with that than I am around most of the children in this country, most of the adults in this country. So, I don't have any like specific ideas, I guess, about how to talk to children about gender and sex, except I just think honestly, you can talk to children about gender and sex without sexualizing children. That's the mistake that people seem to be making. Like, they think that if children know about sex, like, then somehow the children will become sexual beings, whereas they weren't before. I don't think that's true. I think that I don't see any point in like withholding information about sex from children, because I think that the notion of childhood innocence about these kinds of things is just just Victorian prudery, basically, that has no basis in reality, first of all, because children have a kind of sexuality, and I don't see that anything is accomplished by withholding the information. And I think that actually, if you withhold the information, you're running the risk that their naivety about it can be exploited by other people, for one thing, or that they will find out in a way that is not as they'll find out in a bad way. They'll find out through pornography when they're 11 years old or something. Like I'm sure most kids today, that's probably their first real exposure to sex is Google, whatever Google turns up. So I would say, if you as a parent or you as a teacher, your discussion of what sex and gender are is likely to be a lot better than the first thing they see on Google. Okay, so Gary Marshall asks, which musical instrument do you feel most proficient with or enjoy playing the most? So proficiency, definitely piano. So I actually have like musical training in piano. I mean, I have a little bit in guitar too. Like, so I took some lessons in high school, but piano, I mean, I started taking lessons when I was 8 years old. I went to school as like a piano major for 2 years. And then later I took some advanced piano lessons at a conservatory because I could for free because I was in grad school. But I am like an okay classical pianist and an okay jazz pianist, and I play pretty much every day. So I guess in that sense I enjoy it the most, and I'm certainly better at it than my guitar or any other instrument. Annoyance asks, will you ever write fiction again? So I used to write fiction. I've talked about this on YouTube before. The year before I started making YouTube videos, I was my attempt at a career was, I'm going to write fiction. I never had any success with it. I don't think I was that good, and I think that I could have gotten better, obviously, if I'd stuck with it instead of giving it all up to become a YouTuber. Will I ever write it again? Yeah, probably. I mean, in a sense, I already do. Like, when I write these videos, like debating the alt-right or the dialogue that I'm working on now, like, it's a kind of fiction, right? I'm writing a dialogue for characters. There's sort of a plot. Like, I guess that is fiction, in a sense. It uses the skills from fiction writing, as much as philosophy, anyway. You're creating a voice for a new character. That's fiction. But will I write short stories again or a novel someday? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It depends on how full of myself I get later in life. No, that's not true. I don't know. I imagine someday probably the inspiration will hit me to attempt that again. But probably not in the near future. I don't have any like short story ideas I'm dying to get out. But someday probably. Tom Martell asks, what kind of milk is it that you use during your wolf's milk scenes? It looks the wrong color to be regular dairy milk. I'd guess soy, which due to its alleged estrogenic properties would be a fitting counter to the whole milk crowd. Yeah, you're right. So it's soy milk. It's funny because there's a lot of like vegans who are a little bit upset with me because of all the meat and milk on the channel, which I understand because it's true that meat eating meat in our society is not very ethical because of the way it's produced. But so I can't really apologize for that because I'm guilty. But the milk, I can assure you, vegans, is in fact soy milk. So no need to fear about that. But almost all the milk I use on this channel is soy milk. That's why it has that color. And also, yeah, it's kind of funny that it's soy milk because of it's the beta cuck alternative to the white nationalists drinking milk, ironically, to preserve their racial purity or whatever it is, because that's how milk works, obviously. Yeah, so it's soy milk. Now, as far as does soy actually have estrogenic properties, my understanding of the science on this is not super advanced, but I believe what soy milk and what soy has is what's called phytoestrogens. And I actually don't think there's any good evidence to suggest that these do really anything much in your body. I mean, otherwise trans women wouldn't bother with hormones. We'd all just be drinking soy milk. But I don't think there's any evidence that it actually has significant estrogenic effects in the body. Fully automated luxury space post-scarcity communism asks, we've got a H-Bomber Guy fan on our hands here, asks, what is your favorite race and class to play as in Skyrim or any other Elder Scrolls game? I'm so upset that I haven't ever gotten to do a Skyrim stream, but I need to fix my computer issues. So I guess what I want to do is I really want to play as a Khajiit, like a genderqueer Khajiit, maybe like a Muslim Khajiit, who I guess because obviously the shitlords at Bethesda have forced you to choose between in the binary, so probably a female Khajiit class, something sneaky and kind of cuckish, stealth and archery, that kind of thing. Marksman, I guess it's called. I guess so. When I was a teenager, I was a big Morrowind fan, and I always used to look at the Dark Elves because the Morrowind is kind of the heyday of the Dark Elves in the Elder Scrolls history. They had cool voices, and then they got rid of the cool voices. So I like the Dark Elves, I guess, too. That's probably most of the characters I've actually played, not on a live stream, are usually Dark Elves. And I like sort of magic and combat hybrids because I can't make up my goddamn mind, just like with the gender thing. Okay, James Rands. I always get the impression that it's a common belief amongst the conservative right that their politics is somehow masculine. Hence insults like cuck and faggot get thrown around pretty liberally. Any idea why? Yes, that's a good question. So I guess that's sort of what my Alpha Males video was about, right? Is these weird connections between far-right politics and this kind of politicizing of masculinity. I mean, where there's a constant implication or sometimes explicit assertion that right-wing politics are masculine. I mean, where it gets confusing, not confusing, but the caveat on that is that usually what they are is not necessarily simply enforcing masculinity, but they want to enforce traditional gender roles. So masculine men and feminine women, as God intended, right? That's the message of the Golden One, for instance. But they also tend to be male supremacists. So they do think that their politics is in general masculine. And they think of the state or the nation as basically masculine, right? They're thinking of it as the men of the nation because their rhetoric works in terms of like fear of invasion, usually the idea that so all this refugee rape stuff, right? Oh God, the refugees that are going to come in, they're going to rape our women. It's a sense of the man's house being violated, right? Like it's sort of the national invasion of refugees kind of corresponds to it's very similar actually to the fears of these American gun nuts, right? If you talk to them about it's always like protecting your family and your daughters, right? Men protecting women is the fantasy from foreign rapists breaking into your house, breaking into your country. So I think masculinity, or a certain type of masculinity, toxic masculinity we could call it, is basically defensive stance or defensive posture, because what you're trying to signal by showing that you're hard, right? Hard masculinity is you're showing that you're dangerous. You're not to be messed with. If someone messes with you or insults you or, touches your woman, like the consequences will be violent. And this is a posture that people adopt, in situations of survival. That's probably where this comes from, right? Is that if you live in like Homeric times, or it's similar to the honor culture idea in social psychology, right? If you are kind of like a shepherd or a herder, or you're in the Wild West or something, like you might need, or you're, for that matter, a gangster, a drug dealer, who can't rely on the police to protect them. You have to show the world that you are not to be fucked with and that you are dangerous. And so there's a kind of masculinity that evolves around that idea, or that need, the need to signal your danger or your strength. Whereas femininity is kind of a protected set of characteristics. Femininity flourishes inside, where in the courtyard, in the harem, right? When the men are protecting you, then you get to be feminine. Or if the police are protecting you, then you get to be feminine. So there's a lot of there tends to be, in a sense, there's more femininity in male upper classes in a way. Among upper class men, there's femininity because they don't need it. The police are there to protect them. They don't need to be masculine. Now they like to posture, George Bush wearing his cowboy hat and pretending to be a man, pretending to be a real man, or Trump for that matter. But yeah, you're right that calling people cock and faggot, it's definitely a masculine thing. They're disparaging your masculinity. Alejandro Herrera asks, how do you get your hair looking so fabulous? Oh, well, thank you. This is happy to take questions that are really compliments. Well, I don't know. First, I guess I bleached the shit out of it. That's how I got to where it is right now. And then use lots of moisturizing conditioner and comb your hair. Like, I have a brush right here, but like I think a lot of men tend to ask me about like hair because they don't know how to have long hair that looks good, and the answer is just like take care of it on a basic level. So comb it and brush it. Use conditioner. Don't let it become a horrible tangled mess, like a lot of men do. So I'm not some kind of hair guru. I don't have any expert tips. I would just say basically conditioner. Wash it. Brush it. If you have kind of mousy, dark blonde, boring hair like mine, dye it. It looks better. Ever plan on doing a collab with other folks like you used to? Happened in this old DPR Jones video from years ago you were in. Oh God. Well, I mean, I sort of do collabs. I was just in a philosophy tube video. Go look up his video on Kant that I was in. I was the voice of a 19th century German woman who wrote to Kant, but I don't know how to do a woman's voice with a German accent, because the only German voice I can do is a Werner Herzog impression. So that's what I did, is a Werner Herzog impersonation. And I guess, would I do more collabs on my channel with other people? I mean, so I really liked having the voices of a bunch of other YouTubers and what the alt-right fears. So if I need more voiceover stuff, I definitely should I do want to do more collabs. But the type of video I do doesn't like, what I need is actors basically. Like so I'm trying to work with more other people. And the fact that I actually have Patron funding now means that I can actually hire people. So in my last video, I got Zoe Blade, who is a composer and a performer on analog synthesizers. She wrote a lot of the music for that video, particularly the music in the medical scenes. And you hear these like this rhythm of like knives scraping and drill sounds in the background. She recorded all that stuff with like power drills and knives. and I like paid her to do that. So that's something that I can do with funding, is pay other artists to help work on videos. And collabing with other YouTubers, yeah, I'd like to do that, although because the videos I do are big and elaborate, I kind of can't just do the thing where like two people sit on their bed and have a conversation. You know, a lot of people do that kind of video, but that is not really the type of video I do, although I'd be happy to do it on someone else's channel. I'm talking a lot. My voice is getting hoarse already. This is bad. Drink some wine. Which YouTuber or YouTubers have had the most... this is from the questions from H. Brandel. Which YouTuber or YouTubers have had the most influence on you and your work? Tons of YouTubers. Basically, I watch a lot of YouTube. And before I started making these videos, I watched a lot of YouTube. So I guess initially I was really influenced, and this is obvious if you watch my early videos, I was really influenced by Red Letter Media and those Plinkett reviews. What I liked about them is I don't really care that much about the Star Wars prequels and the fact that they're not good. Like, this isn't super interesting to me as a topic, but I find these videos like endlessly rewatchable because they're so entertaining and funny. So that was kind of one of the things that inspired the style of my channel, because I figured that when you have especially with social justice topics, like, people don't want to think about these things because thinking about it is hard, and you have to question yourself, and you have to acknowledge your privilege, and that's not fun, and no one wants to do it. But I figured if stylistically I could make it funny or make it fun, well, then people might want to watch the videos more. And some of my early videos, like there's jokes that are obviously just like Plinkett ripoffs, which I've talked about in my commentary streams on those videos. But I don't feel too bad about it, because if you watch YouTubers, ripping off Plinkett is incredibly common on YouTube. Everyone fucking rips off Plinkett. I try not to do it that much anymore. I don't really do it that much anymore because I've sort of developed my own style. Other YouTubers I've been influenced by, obviously H Bomber Guy, especially around this time last year, I guess I first discovered H Bomber Guy, and his videos really inspired a lot of the stuff I did last fall. So like the Alpha Males video, the Pickup Artists video, all that kind of stuff was very heavily H Bomber Guy influenced. More recently, Lindsay Ellis, her videos have definitely inspired me a lot. A lot of the visual look of my videos has been inspired by various ASMR ladies. Like, I don't watch them that much anymore, but for a while I watched ASMR videos all the time, and what I like about them, I mean, obviously they sound amazing, but visually a lot of them are really great too. And they're sort of vlog style in the sense that it's just one person talking to a camera, but it's one person talking to a camera with all these pretty lights and beautiful costumes and amazing makeup and like aesthetic backgrounds and things. And so I guess I got some of the visual look of my channel was definitely inspired by people who do ASMR videos, because they have something interesting to look at. And so I'm inspired by them. I would say How To Basic has inspired some of my jokes. A lot of this like first person perspective stuff, or all the stuff with like food and meat and squids and milk and that's like, I guess, kind of a How To Basic. I mean, How To Basic is obviously much better at these things than me, because all How To Basic is like these like visceral textural things happening with food, and they're very funny. But that kind of stuff definitely works its way into my videos. I guess I try to be, I don't know, I try to open myself up to influence from like all corners of YouTube. That's kind of what I think of myself as doing, is like some of the style of my videos is just playing around with like YouTube as a whole, like taking inspiration from all over YouTube. So take, anyone who has a good idea, steal it. Steal all the good ideas. Like steal the ASMR people ideas. Steal How To Basics ideas. Steal Plinkett's ideas. Steal H Bomber Guy and Lindsay Ellis. I'm just a big stealing machine. And it's not stealing if you reconfigure it enough. So creativity is basically just rearranging things in a new way. So that's sort of how I think about the style of my channel, is that I'm just kind of picking things up from other channels and then assembling a collage in a way that when it's all together is original. Kolbein Mani asks, hello Contra, what are your goals in life? Who do you want to work with? Would you be interested in starring in a full-length movie? What is your opinion on sex? Wow, that is a lot of questions. Since I'm definitely going to get through all the $10 questions, I'll see if I can answer all of them. What are my goals in life? I don't know. I don't have goals anymore. I used to have goals when I was younger. I was like, I'm going to be this. I'm going to be this. You know, I'll be a great philosopher. I'll be a great artist. Like, I'm done with that. I'm too old. I just want to. My goals right now. I don't have long-term goals really. My goals are to be a better YouTuber, and to try to be a happier person, and to try to help in any small way that I can make the internet a better place, since the internet is the future of humanity, it seems. And it kind of sucks. So that's my, I guess, political goal, is to make the internet suck less. Who do I want to work with? Well, so I mean, as in terms of like getting off YouTube, I mean, I want to keep doing YouTube as my main gig. I like it a lot. Am I willing to branch out and do some other things too? Yeah, definitely. Some of my videos are actually going to be shown this fall at a art gallery in Belfast. So that's really cool. I like, it'll be nice to have, like, you know, a museum show on my artist's resume. That makes me seem more legit than just being a YouTuber. A lot of people have suggested that if I do another movie like the gender dysphoria one, or that one, like, I should submit it to film festivals. And I've thought about that, like, that would be really fun to do, is to get something, make something good enough that I felt like submitting it to a film festival. And that could open doors for me in terms of doing things beyond YouTube, you know, especially if I do something that wins an award. Like if you have an award-winning film behind you and some gallery shows, you're like a real artist now. You're not just some asshole on the internet. So I guess those are goals, short-term goals anyway. I mean, some people have suggested, like, oh, you could be like Francesca Ramsey and you could get like an MTV show. I don't really want an MTV show. I don't know. That I like having creative control over the stuff that I do, and I don't want to read someone else's script. Not that I completely ruled that out, but that's just not really a goal that I have. Would I be interested in starring in a full-length movie? If anyone wants to star me in a full-length movie, hell yeah. I don't see that happening anytime soon, but sure. What is my opinion on sex? Well, that is an open-ended question, if there ever was one. Sex. Here, I'll just say this. I don't really have sex right now. I'm just at a point where, like, I don't know. I'm 28 years old. 29 in a couple months. And I am only just now figuring out what my gender is. I'm starting a second adolescence. I shouldn't really be having sex. I don't. I feel like if you're gonna have a sex life, you should come from some like basic place of security in yourself and who you are, and like emotional stability. And I'm not in that place, so no sex for me for a while. I'm open to getting drunk and making out with people. That's fine. Vernacular. What are your long-term goals for your channel? Well, again, my mind is not directed towards the distant future right now. I mean, I don't know that I have long-term goals, except that I want to keep doing this as long as I can. In the meantime, I like doing what I'm doing. I worry a little bit that some of the stuff that I do is too topical. You know, like this alt-right thing and Richard Spencer, like these are big topics, I guess, but in 5 years, is anyone going to care? And I'm not sure that anyone will. I'm hoping, in fact, that no one will. Because if people still care about Richard Spencer in 5 years, that's really bad. That's really depressing if Richard Spencer is still a relevant person in 5 years. So part of me wants to do some more videos that are a little more evergreen, that people will want to watch in 5 years. You know, so I've thought about doing some videos about philosophical topics, because philosophy, a lot of topics in philosophy are basically eternal. And so I have some videos I want to do about philosophy eventually. Long-term goals, I want to do some videos. A lot of people on the left are always, you know, because I'm kind of a like identity politics, race and gender kind of person. So a lot of people on the left are like, why don't you talk about capitalism? Well, I just am not someone who's like really good at economic analysis. It's just not really I'm just not that kind of person. I feel like it's usually men who like that. That's a stereotype, I know, but like all the people I know who are like, yeah, let's talk about like the hard like economic side of things. They're all these guys. It's just it's a little bit, but I do have some ideas about capitalism that I want to talk about. I want to talk about the psychology of living in capitalism, and I have some ideas for videos about that I eventually want to get to. I guess I feel like because of the way politics is right now, actually to me the identity politics stuff feels more urgent, because we're at kind of an important moment in the history of trans rights, I think, and so it's worth talking about that. I think the Trump election and the alt-right and all this stuff show that racial politics is like as big as ever, and so I think that's really important to talk about right now, and so I talk about that. But of course, in the background of all this stuff is the economic issue, right? Economic injustice is kind of, you can't, all these other kinds of injustice are in a sense, well, they're not special cases of economic injustice. No, they're more than that. But economic injustice is an important axis in intersectionality, right? So in some ways, it's the most important axis. And that sounds like a super Marxist thing to say, I know, but I mean, if you're rich in America, you can kind of be whatever else, and it's fine, right? Like being trans has a lot of disadvantages, and trans people are very underprivileged. But Caitlyn Jenner is basically fine. Being black is dangerous in America, and it comes with a lot of disadvantages. But if you're a black celebrity who's making millions of dollars, you're basically fine, right? Like you're doing better off than most white people. So the economic thing is important, and part of the reason, of course, why being trans or being black or is difficult, or being a woman, is that there's an economic disadvantage that comes with that. So I agree that the economic thing needs to be talked about, and I do want to talk about that more in the future. And then, of course, I'll end up with all kinds of other debates, communists versus socialists versus social democrats versus democratic socialists, and all this fighting that I don't usually participate in, but I'll bring it all on myself. Findings of Isaac asks, how would you describe your political journey, so to speak, from teenager to university until now? What do you think has driven these changes in ideology over time? Well, I was always pretty left-wing, I guess. Especially, I was always pretty progressive on the racial issues. So I'm still like that. I guess I've really come a long way on the gender thing. I was kind of misogynistic when I was a teenager, and to be honest, in early 20s, I think actually I might have been transgender earlier if I had not been misogynistic, because that internalized stuff gets to you, and you don't want to be a woman, or you don't want to be feminine at all. If you think that being a woman or feminine makes you less intelligent or makes you not serious, I think one of the reasons that I have been able to express myself as femme, or maybe a trans woman, if that's the direction I'm headed in, we'll see. But part of this has been enabled by my letting go of misogynistic assumptions and my examining of those kinds of things. Because I think that, well, basically just what I just said. If you think that women are not if you feel on some visceral level that like being a woman or being effeminate makes you not smart or makes you not serious, makes you frivolous, then you don't want to be like that. I'm not like the other girls, it's very much that kind of thing. So I would say the gender politics has definitely changed. I guess when I was into new atheism back in like 2009, I was probably way more conservative than I am now, because new atheism is to some extent a conservative movement. I know that's a contentious thing to say, but I think it's getting less contentious now that we look at what the figureheads of new atheism are doing these days. I mean, so Christopher Hitchens, with his support of the war in Iraq, I got kind of sucked into that when I was, 20 years old. And also the sexism that was kind of implicit, sometimes explicit. It's very reactionary. Yeah, and I fell for that at the time. I really did. It took me years to get past that, and I am past it now, thank God. But that's been definitely. I would say I was very liberal and idealistic when I was a teenager. I was kind of a hippie back then. Was more of the slant on it, and then I fell into this new atheist thing, which was kind of reactionary, and now I'm back to being leftist again. So that would be the parabola of my political progress. Okay, so that's actually all of the 10 plus people questions. So that's good. I got through all those. Well, we can start in on some of the. I'm going to try to do this for about another half hour and then call that a stream because my voice is like, I've been talking too much lately. I think my voice it feels really hoarse. Let's find my $2 questions here. Do I have any plans for future okay, Ryan Young asks, do I have any plans for future streams, like people to talk to or games to play? Yes. So I want to get my computer fixed, and I'll finally do my Skyrim stream. And I do still want to do that. What other ideas do I have for future streams? There's a bunch of other people I would like to do live streams with on my main channel. Like, I would like to do another stream with H Bomber Guy and Lindsay Ellis and Dan Olson. I think the last time we did that on Lindsay's channel was really fun. I'd like to do that again. There's a lot of people I would like to talk to kind of one-on-one too. I want to do a stream with Kat Black if she's down. I would like to do that. Maybe Steve Shives. I would like to talk to him about his experience over the last few years on YouTube. Just some ideas. Okay, Quakerin has a really long question. It's about, so the gist of this question is, about being friends with problematic people, or about being friends with people who say transphobic or sexist things. I mean, so I think my general response to, I'm not going to read the whole paragraph. My general response to this is that this is something I actually want to talk to a little bit in the video I do after the TERF one. So I want to do a video about the rhetoric of the political left, and part of that is going to be dealing with, how to behave in public around people who are not Richard Spencer, but people who are Shoe on Head, people who are Armored Skeptic, people who are Dave Rubin. There are definitely a lot of leftists who think like these are the enablers of the reactionaries, meaning they're basically equivalent to reactionaries. Don't be nice to them. I worry that when it comes to that, especially when you do it in public, people see you being hostile to them, and they see you calling them racist and pieces of shit, and they feel that you're calling them and everyone they know racist and pieces of shit. So I think that is something that worries me, because I think if you can find a way, especially for people who are kind of receptive to persuasion, you know what I mean? Like, so I feel really mixed still about that Lacey stream, the stream I did with Lacey Green, because on the one hand, like Lacey, she's very friendly. She wants to be friends with everyone, at least everyone who doesn't criticize her too harshly. And I know that. And so when I was talking to her, she was basically going along with everything I was saying. But then, of course, the next day, she's on the Rubin Report and going along with everything Dave Rubin thinks. So I don't know what to make of this, because when I'm, in a sense, it's awesome if you can make a public appearance with someone who's posturing as a centrist, or who, you know, it doesn't have to be posturing, someone who identifies as a centrist or who is seen as a centrist. And if you can have a conversation with the centrist person and they're kind of like nodding and going along with you, that's good, because that means the other people who are centrists and the other people who are liberals and the other people who are moderates see this interaction, and then they, identifying with the centrist, also feel that they're having a reasonable encounter with your ideas. And this is exactly the reason why I was horrified by Roaming Millennial's conversation with Richard Spencer. It's because that's what she did to him. She said, I'm a reasonable moderate, talking to Richard Spencer, and Richard Spencer's talking about his genocidal ideas, and Roaming Millennial is just kind of sitting there like, okay, that's an interesting idea. I'm not sure I completely agree. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, are you kidding me, Roaming? Like, it's so helpful to him. It's so helpful to Richard Spencer. But, you know, if people, so when it comes to people, you know, give me shit for being friends with Shoe on Head, and I can kind of see both sides of this, because on the one hand, it's like me, I'm supposed to be an advocate for trans people and for feminists and so on. Why am I hanging out with this person who says shitty things about those groups all the time? That sends a bad message. But also, I don't know, the flip side of it is that it sends a message to her following, which is much bigger than mine, that Shoe on Head hangs out with this genderqueer feminist, which might point, you know what I mean? Like, that thing goes both ways. So they might see that, and then they might come to my channel, or they might their opinion that they have that all feminists and all non-binary people are just like snowflakes and hysterical and they won't talk to anyone, they're unreasonable. That might be harder for them to think if they see someone they look up to being friendly with them. But I understand it's complicated, and I maybe, you know, I'm open to being criticized on this. I understand why some people criticize me for it. All right, Sarah Adams, another long question. Let's see. Okay. In my opinion, is drag different from what I was doing in my videos before I identified as a non-binary trans female? I don't think it was really drag, because to me, drag is a specific tradition of performance art that involves really exaggerated makeup and certain clothes and wigs and things, and I wasn't really doing that. You know, I used to wear more makeup and stuff, and it was closer to drag back then than it is now. But I wouldn't call it drag. I would say that it was kind of performative cross-dressing, although the thing is, why was I doing it? I mean, for me, YouTube has been a way, not that YouTube is a super safe space, but it's in a way safer than the sidewalk in Baltimore. You know, it was a kind of safe way for me to experiment with feminine gender presentation, and a way for me to do it a lot and to get comfortable with it and to look at myself doing it and to have other people see me doing it. And it really helped me get to the point I am now, where I'm like, this is actually who I am, and this is my authentic gender expression. It's not a costume anymore. This is me. So I don't think it was drag, but I think that's a pretty good summary of what I think about it. So the other question is about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I have to admit, I'm not really very familiar with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so I can't answer that. I should clearly go watch Buffy. Arthur asks, we've been transitioning at roughly the same rate, which has been both bizarre and convenient. We're even starting HRT about the same time. About HRT, is there anything in particular you're worried about? How are you dealing with it? I really want to be on HRT. Like, that is honestly one of the things that worries me least, in a sense, because I basically desire all of its effects. I mean, there's like the little things that you worry about. You know, you're like, oh God, like I hear like lots of people, like the one breast grows larger than the other one at first, or, you know, that's going to be weird and I'm worried about that. Okay, yeah, I guess I'm a little worried about that, you know. But I worry more about the social aspect of transitioning than the physical aspect. And I don't know if this is weird or not, but I'm actually more confident in the physical aspect. Like, I want I want those goddamn hormones. I want to have I want to get rid of my body hair. I want to have smooth skin. I want the female fat distribution. I want tits, goddammit. But it's actually what's more frightening to me is in a way changing my name and asking people to use my new pronouns and voice training so that I can, be more passable as a woman in public. Like these things all kind of weird me out more because changing my body, whatever. I'm just changing my body so that I feel more comfortable with it, and so it's like what the body I want to have. But changing your pronouns and your name and your voice, that feels more like changing the person I am, And so that is actually the thing I have more hangups about. And I'm still sort of unsure how far I'm going to go with that and what steps I'm going to take. So the hormones, yeah, I'm not too worried about them. They're pretty safe. I mean, the one thing you do worry about it is that it is pretty permanent, especially in long term. I mean, you sterilize yourself eventually, so that's a thing that obviously I've spent a lot of time thinking about. I don't want to talk about it too much because that involves some personal stuff. I might talk about it eventually, but yeah, I mean breasts. I mean you can always get a breast reduction. So no, I'm just overwhelmingly looking forward to hormones for the most part. Joy asks, can you recommend some books that I think are cool? Fiction, non-fiction, philosophy, just no Hegel. So this is a bit embarrassing to say, but I honestly don't read that much anymore. I read so many books last year. These days I don't have that much time to read books. I spend all my time reading YouTube comments, which is horribly depressing. I want to read more. The book I actually am reading a book right now. I'm reading The Naked Civil Servant by Quentin Crisp, and I do suggest this. Or for those of you who don't read, watch Quentin Crisp's lectures on YouTube. If you don't know who he is, Quentin Crisp was a male homosexual who was out in the 1930s in London, and he wore makeup in public at a time when even for women to wear makeup was considered kind of like a tardy thing to do, right? Sleazy. So it was just like an outrage that he would do this, and he would get beaten up all the time or shouted at. It was just a massive public spectacle, but he did it anyway. And then he became a celebrity later in America, as so many English gay men do. Americans, we just love them. We love English gay men. We'll just listen to them all day. I don't know what it is, but he did that whole thing. Yeah, his book is great. I suggest reading that. It's very interesting to read about someone who was it's not even his homosexuality that he said causes the outrage, but his effeminacy. I guess one of the reasons why I like his book is that also I find I draw courage from it, because it's not easy to be a non-passing trans femme person in public a lot of the time for me, It's hard. People look at you. So I look at, he put up with more than I ever put up with, so it's a source of courage to me. So that's one book recommendation. That's gonna have to do for now because we're running short on time. I've often looked at, Blake asks, what would my advice be to, I'm just giving you the question, what would my advice be to new YouTubers trying to move the discourse in a less toxic direction? Is it possible to reach normally right-leaning audiences on the issue while minimizing the toxicity involved? Well, Blake, actually what you say in the first paragraph is very similar to what I said answering an earlier question on this stream, which is that, yeah, right, these framing devices that I do, having dinner with someone, pretend if you're going to make response videos to shitlords or whoever else, one, choose your shitlords wisely. Don't make responses to bearing. Choose someone who's actually interested in ideas. Armored Skeptic is an okay person to make response videos to, I find. People like that who will willing to sort of engage on it. The other bit of advice is pretend that you're talking to them. Assume that they will watch your video, because they probably will. So speak to the webcam like you're speaking to the person, and that itself helps a conversation get started instead of trading ponage. Alex asks, what do I think of the push to redefine the terms male and female to correspond to one's gender identity as opposed to assumed reproductive capability? I'm a trans man and I'm currently on the fence about this issue. Yeah, that's a great question. So this is like, I guess on YouTube, Riley Dennis is the leader of the push, right? To not, she just did a very long, I think, pretty convincingly argued video about why we should drop the biological male-female language, because to most people, male implies man, right? And male is just like the adjective form of man. So to say that trans women are biologically male, when most people hear that, the connotation is that you're saying that trans women are men. And so that's reason to be critical of this male-female biological language. Now, I think there's some contexts where it's probably fine. I think that when you're talking about animals, male and female is just fine. The animals don't really have gender. But I think that it's really worth, I agree with Riley that it's worth questioning this idea when it comes to medicine, especially like it's, people like, I have this argument with Lacey where she says, well, like I have to use male, female in order just to be able to have a conversation in sex ed for simplicity's sake. Okay, but sometimes simplicity causes you to lose information that you need. And actually, when it comes to like healthcare situations, trans people's healthcare is damaged by the assumption that everyone's male or female, because trans people often don't fit medically, biologically, into one of those categories or the other. So it's not really helpful to say that a trans woman is male from a medical perspective, because when it comes to things like assessing risks of osteoporosis, breast cancer, heart disease, all kinds of things, like the hormones change all of that. So I think that in those kinds of contexts, deconstructing the male-female thing is definitely worth doing. Cecilia asks, reading books used to be my biggest hobby, but since my depression, my concentration has been getting worse. How or were you able to read big chunky books with academic lingo that most people find boring? And what are your tips for reading? So there was a time when I was 22 years old when I had incredible patience for the most tedious books ever written. And I'm glad that I was like that, because I'm not like that now. I can't read those books anymore. If I hadn't read them then, it would never have happened. I mean, I read Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit, which is the most difficult and tedious and horrible book ever written. I read James Joyce's Ulysses. I read Infinite Jest cover to cover. I read all this fucking shit. I would never read any of this now. It's too hard. I don't have the patience or the time. Don't read Hegel. Some of it's not worth reading. I mean, so when it comes to advice for reading, so if you want to read like jargony philosophy, you have to kind of learn to speak this language. You have to learn a new language for each philosopher. And one thing that helps, if you read, so suppose you want to read Kant. Kant's a very jargony, difficult writer. One thing that helps is find like Google like Kant glossary or something, and you can find some Kant scholar online who has assembled a collection of, what does a priori mean? What does synthetic mean to Kant? What all these terms mean that he's using? And that way you can learn Kant's unique vocabulary, and you can read it with the help of this like dictionary, because otherwise it's really hard to understand. As far as reading like big works of fiction, like Infinite Jest, if you want to attempt that shit, I mean, I would say with Infinite Jest, almost like it's so long that you actually can't sit around worrying about understand. You can't look up every word. It'll slow you down too much. You kind of just need to move on. So with fiction, try to find the parts of it that are enjoyable to you. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be pleasurable, in my opinion. If you're reading a book and you're a third into it and you just hate it, read something else. You don't have to read Infinite Jest. It's not a requirement. Life isn't that long. Don't read books that you don't like. I guess my advice is don't bother. It's not don't bother, but if you really want to do it, try to, set aside a specific amount of time each day that you can afford. And I find actually that reading a difficult book can have rewards, even if it's not like really fun, even if you don't like look forward to it every day. Like just working on it, trying to understand it, thinking about it, it's kind of a good exercise. It makes you think about new things. Josephine asks, Dear Contra, what do you think the end game of ideological wars online will be in real life? Will they translate into action? Well, so I think the main, for me with social justice activism anyway, the main end game is spreading awareness, which sounds like a kind of like slacktivism bullshit kind of thing to do, but actually on certain points awareness is actually vitally important. I think especially when it comes to like the trans issue, for instance, because most people just have no idea what being trans even is. And this is something that I've found as I find myself coming out to people, including friends, including family, people who are extremely progressive. And I explain that I'm like going to start transitioning, and I find that they have no idea what being trans even is. And so that's when it becomes apparent to me that like we need like really public education about this. And so if you can teach people what being trans means, if you can make them understand it and make them sympathize with it, that's extremely helpful. It has direct benefits to any trans people who that person is going to later run into in life. So I think that's really helpful. As far as all this like alt-right versus SJW stuff goes, well, I think the alt-right shit has absolutely real-world consequences. I think that online culture has not, I think, is not primarily responsible for the outcome of the 2016 American election, but I think it is a little bit involved. I think Breitbart and InfoWars get some of the blame for what happened. So I think that this is how people get their information now, and I think that absolutely matters. It definitely has real world consequences. Your other question is, what's my view of polyamory and open relationships? I've been in open relationships before. I can't say I've ever made it work, but I've never made a relationship work. I'm single as fuck. So I don't know. I'm not the best person to ask for relationship advice, I guess. Do I think that open relationships can work? Absolutely. I know people who make them work and are very happy with them. So I think it's a matter of personal preference. I think for some people, they just emotionally they need monogamy, but other people emotionally need polyamory, and I think they're both fine. I don't think anything is wrong with either of them. David the Benevolent Malevolence asks, if one were to be taking uppers, should they perhaps mix them with downers? I see someone has been on my streams before. Yes, you always want to mix your uppers with your downers. It's the only safe way to do things. I guess I should say as a disclaimer that's the opposite of true. This is a joke. That said, I love booze and caffeine. Because I'm running out of time, and David asked like 5 questions. I'm going to answer everyone else's questions, and I'll get back to those. Jose asks, did you catch any of the Politicon debates? I did not. So I can't say what I thought about that, unfortunately. Amerwich, if that's how this is pronounced, asks, what size shoes do you wear? Well, I wear women's size 11.5, which is men's size 9.5, which obviously by the standards of most women is big. Big enough that finding women's shoes is a little bit difficult. But it could be a lot worse, considering that I'm a side male at birth and 6'2". A lot of people who are assigned male at birth and 6'2" have feet at least 2 or 3 sizes larger than mine. So I am fucking lucky that I'm only size 11.5. You can find women's shoes on Amazon at that size. Yeah, my feet are small for someone of my height. It's true. So, yeah, it's not the worst. But still, they're too big. My feet are too big. I wish they were smaller. But, you know, really what I wish I were is shorter. Like, I would love to be 5'7", and I could wear heels then. I don't get to wear heels because I'm too tall. I know, like a radical feminist cis women will be like angry at me for saying I want to wear heels because they're like, yes, how dare you dabble in the drapery of oppression? But like, I'm sorry, heels, they look good. I know they suck to have to wear out, granted, but they do look pretty, and I like pretty things, and so I would like to wear them. But if I wear them, I become a giant monster person, and so I don't wear them. Marshall Stacks asks, hello, I discovered your channel from Sean and Jen. I'm glad your voice is out there since I have approximately 1 quintillionth your courage. Oh, well, that's very flattering, Marshall. I assume this is a reference to Marshall half stacks, right? Or Marshall amps. What has been the biggest challenge since starting this channel? I don't know. What has been the biggest challenge? The biggest challenge is really just like being self-employed and just getting the stuff out. Like, the biggest challenge is just making myself sit down and fucking write the videos. And the biggest challenge is also the deadlines that I have to make for myself. Like, in order to survive and to make money, I have to have a video a month. Well, I used to have, it was 2 videos a month. I've got to go back to 2 videos a month this month. I got to do 2 videos in August because I need money for some transition expenses. But the last 2 months I just did 1 video. But still, like, when I'm trying to get a video out on time, I'm often like pulling all-nighters basically, and that's hard. I would say that, like, in some ways, like, yeah, getting like hate bombed by 8chan on occasion is kind of hard, but I don't know. I've honestly been kind of luckier than a lot of people have. Like, the campaigns of vilification against me have basically been short-lived, and I don't get a massive amount of hate on a daily basis. So really, I've been lucky. The other question is, what are some musicians you're listening to these days? Okay, so I used to be very music snobbish when I was a teenager, but these days I like there's something from almost every genre I listen to. What I happen to be listening to right now is a few different things. I like Savant, who is an EDM producer. I guess he does like dubstep originally, but it's not just dubstep. It's like, it's really more than dance music. It's like really artfully made. And yeah, it definitely is still connected to dubstep in terms of like the roots of it, but it's more than just like crazy dubstep noises. The compositions are beautiful a lot of the time. So like Savant, I listen to a lot of 50s rock and roll these days. I listen to the 50s rock and roll Pandora station all the time. I like that classic stuff. I listen to, what is other new music that I like? Because obviously we know about the old music that I like. I'm kind of coming up blank on like any kind of like creative musical suggestions that I have. I don't know. I listen to the radio in the car. That's not an interesting answer. So I'll say Savant. If people haven't heard of Savant, they can check out Savant, and I'll feel like I answered this question well. All right, let's go back and look at David's Benevolent Benevolence other questions. These are troll questions, David. These are troll questions. Where do bees go when they're ill? Are there any things I really want to do on YouTube aside from LGBTQ and feminism? Well, I've done a lot of stuff on race. I talked earlier about how I want to talk about the economic side of things a little more and do some philosophy videos. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to do maybe 10 or 15 more minutes. I'm going to open this up to the chat, and if you guys have anything to ask, I will answer it. So I'm just going to wait a few seconds for the lag to catch you up, and then I'll start answering chat questions. How do you argue against people who say they're only conservative for economic reasons? Yeah, so I know a lot of people who say that. I mean, one way, of course, is to say that you can't really separate the economics from the social stuff in a lot of ways. Like, it's kind of like, it's a little bit hard to be an economic libertarian and also a progressive when it comes to black civil rights, for instance, in America, you know? So that is one way to go. Although a philosophically sophisticated libertarian can counter that. But most of them aren't that philosophically sophisticated. I mean, I would argue that you could just make the economic arguments, you know, the usual kind of socialist or progressive arguments against wealth inequality and so on. Victoria, will I marry you? Sure. Annoyance. Would I want to do HRT progress videos on my channel or live channel? Maybe. I've thought about it. I don't know. It's not really like, I don't know. I guess I could just do vlogs about it, you know, and like as I'm getting, you know, preparing to start this, I don't know, should I be photographically documenting it? A lot of people do that. It seems a bit exhibitionistic, but that's never stopped me from doing anything before. So I'm thinking about it, maybe. Why do I think scrawny teenage nerds get invested in the idea of masculinity? Well, because they're insecure, and because it's an idea that's presented to them as necessary. You know, it's like, do you remember when I was, so in like 1996 or whatever, when I was 8 years old, there was a children's show that aired in the early 90s called Barney and Friends or something, with a dinosaur Barney. I'm pretty sure people still know who Barney is, right? Even the children in this stream. So when you were 8 years old in 1996, it became very cool to shit on Barney. Like, fuck Barney. I'm a big kid now. I don't watch that shit for kids, you know? So in a way, you know, when you're 15 years old and you're a scrawny little boy, you need to prove that you're not a child anymore and that you're a man. And so getting invested in the idea of masculinity is a way to do that. And that's part of it, right? I think, do I have any, Jeff asks, do I have any problems recording vocals with ambient noise? Oh yeah. I mean, it's like the bane of my existence is ambient noise. I mean, the house that I'm in, there's the air conditioning that I have to fucking turn off. There's the toilet in the bathroom, and if I'm filming close to that, it turns on. I film in the kitchen sometimes, and the refrigerator turns on. It's a nightmare. Yes, it's very difficult to get. The one thing I love about this room that I'm in right now is that it's actually very sound isolated. The problem is that this desktop computer down here is kind of loud. You can probably hear it actually on the microphone right now. So I usually turn this computer off when I film videos in here. Do I have an easy term? Simon asked, do I have an easy term for how I describe my current political views? Progressive, I guess. I know that is a lack of commitment on the economic issue, but good. I don't have commitment on the economic issue yet. By that I mean, like, people sometimes want to ask me, like, are you a socialist? Are you a democratic socialist? Are you a socialist Democrat? Or are you a communist? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. If I were to come to Vancouver sometime, could you take me out in a platonic way for a hangout? Yeah, absolutely. Good brands for headbands. I don't know. I just get the ones at the drugstore. I'm really not nothing fancy. I can see that Stanley Kubrick definitely influences your videos. It's great. Who are some other directors you like and who influence your style? Well, The first person who comes to mind, because I guess he comes to mind first because people always pointing it out. But David Lynch, I like David Lynch. Although the funny thing is that for someone who likes David Lynch, I kind of don't like a lot of his stuff. Like I think a lot of his movies are just not good. His big weaknesses as a director, and as a writer especially. But he has a basic. He has what I mean. If you have this, then you're a good artist, basically. And he has a vision, this intuitive sense of a dreamlike quality that I admire, although I don't think he has any insight into it at all. Who else? What other directors? Lars von Trier. I don't know that I'm influenced by these people. I mean, I just make YouTube videos. Not that, there's only so much room for being influenced. I like some of Lars von Trier's stuff, not Nymphomaniac. I thought that was terrible, but I liked Melancholia. I liked Antichrist. Watch at your own risk. Werner Herzog. I love Werner Herzog. His stuff is so comfortingly void of sexuality. And his documentaries are human and beautiful. I love the way that... So here's the thing that I'm influenced by Herzog. Is that when I'm covering a topic, I try not just to cover the topic in a scientific way, but to also look at the humanity around the topic. So when Werner Herzog does a documentary about Antarctica, it's not just a documentary about the science of penguins. It's about the people who live on the base, and about the janitors, and the guy who repairs the ice cream machine, and the truck drivers, and what they think about things. And he asks all of them. So when I'm covering a topic like, if I'm going to talk about Baltimore and racial injustice in Baltimore and the riots, I don't, I talk about redlining and about the history of that and the economic injustice and things, but also remember that this is stories of particular people, and that's more interesting to most people than facts and statistics. Are stories of particular people. Obviously, I don't do documentaries where I interview people, but if I did, I would look up to Herzog as a source for how to make things human. Let's see. Hold on, I lost where I was in the comments. How do I think gender dysphoria compares to mental illness? I have a lot of anxiety, depression. I feel like there's overlap on some points. Well, I think the consensus, even among trans people, is that gender dysphoria is a mental illness. That's, it's in the DSM anyway, and the treatment of it, the way you treat gender dysphoria is transitioning, is hormones, is changing your name, is these kinds of things. So yeah, there is a lot of overlap with anxiety and depression. In fact, gender dysphoria is kind of a sub-case of, or a subsection of anxiety and depression, but it's anxiety and depression specifically focused on your gender. How do I feel about non-binary people who don't experience gender dysphoria, but rather just don't identify with either gender more than the other? Does this complicate the narrative the public hears? So I think for political reasons, we often want to emphasize gender dysphoria and how miserable it makes us and how we can't live without transitioning. Because, in the same way that like gay activists have had to emphasize for decades how being a homosexual is not a choice, they cannot live any other way. They have to be like this, and this is the only way they can be happy. And it's politically advantageous to emphasize that. And it is true for some people. It's true for a lot of trans people that the only way they can be happy is to transition. It's true for a lot of gay people that the only way they can be happy is to live in homosexual relationships. But I also think that this can sometimes be done at the risk of erasing people for whom that's not necessarily true. It can erase bisexual people, for instance, when it comes to, because bisexual people probably could be happy in heterosexual relationships, and in the case of trans people, yeah, it does sort of erase people who are genderqueer or non-binary, or who don't experience intense dysphoria. I mean, I don't think that, like, I don't at all think that someone who doesn't experience dysphoria is like a trender or faking it. Like, if you like having a gender expression that's different from the one that's typical from your gender assigned at birth, then fucking do that. Like, you're absolutely entitled to. You don't have to have dysphoria as some kind of, like, to be real. You know, it's not like a test that you have to pass in order to be real trans. I think that's a stupid position. It's just one that's politically necessary because of all the fucking transphobia that exists. If we didn't have the transphobia, then people wouldn't care so much. And it's too bad that those people sometimes have to experience hostility from other trans people or advocates because of the political situation. But I think it's perfectly legitimate to be genderqueer without dysphoria. If that's just what you like doing, then fucking do it. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I don't know if it's like if someone were to say, like, I think I'm, like, mostly straight, but I also just kind of like having gay sex sometimes. Well, good, have gay sex sometimes. Like, it's allowed. Like, you don't have to be, you know. I don't see why it has to be. There has to be this underlying misery for it to be legitimate. Although there often is the underlying misery, granted. Ugh. My voice is dying. All right, let's go scroll down. Okay, I think that's gonna be enough for this stream. So I will upload this. The whole thing will be archived. I'm gonna post it's gonna be unlisted, so you probably won't be able to find it on my channel. But just check Patreon. I'll post it probably tomorrow once it's done. Like, do whatever it has. YouTube. It takes a while after you finish the stream for YouTube to process it. So I'll probably post the whole thing tomorrow. And hopefully you guys like this stream. Leave a comment and let me know what you thought, and hopefully this works as a Patron reward. I think it went pretty well. All right, bye everyone.